I was sleeping in my car behind a grocery store, sharing cold fries with my dog, when I found a key hidden inside his collar. My mom swore my grandpa died broke 8 years ago, leaving me nothing but a flea-bitten mutt. She was wrong. By the time I walked into court with a ruthless lawyer, my mother was begging for a 50-50 split. I did not raise my voice. I just let the judge see exactly what Grandpa left inside that collar. My name is Faith Bryant. I am 29 years old, and until about 6 months ago, I was a certified veterinary technician with steady hands and a decent credit score. Now, I am a ghost haunting the back lot of a 24-hour grocery store in Cedar Ridge, Montana, living inside a beat-up station wagon that smells permanently of wet fur and stale anxiety. The windows were fogged up again. That was the first thing I noticed when I woke up. The condensation clinging to the glass like a second skin. It meant it was cold outside, likely dropping below freezing, and it meant I had to be careful. Foggy windows were a dead giveaway to the night shift security guards that someone was sleeping inside. If they saw the fog, they knocked. If they knocked, I had to move, and I did not have enough gas to move. I shifted my legs, trying to work the cramp out of my left calf without waking Buddy. He was a 60-pound mixed breed, mostly shepherd with a little bit of something stubborn thrown in, and he took up 2/3 of the back seat I had converted into a bed. My setup was precise because it had to be. The back seats were folded down flat. A layer of cardboard boxes provided insulation against the metal floor, topped with 2 old yoga mats and a sleeping bag I had salvaged from a donation bin. My entire life was packed into 3 plastic totes shoved against the front seats. My breath plumed in the air, white and ghostly in the dim amber light filtering in from the parking lot street lamps. I reached for the bottle of water I kept in the cup holder, taking a sip to wash away the metallic taste of sleep. It was ice cold. I checked my phone. It was 3 a.m. The battery was at 14%. I needed to turn it off to save power, but the screen lit up with a notification from the day before that I had been ignoring. It was from the group chat named Family Crew. I opened it, the blue light stinging my tired eyes. There was a photo from my mother, Denise. It was a selfie of her and my younger sister, Brooke, clinking glasses of mimosa at a brunch spot in downtown Bozeman. They looked radiant. Their skin was glowing. Their hair was perfectly blown out, and they were smiling the kind of smiles that said they had never had to decide between buying toothpaste or buying bread. Underneath the photo, my mother had written, "Celebrating Brooke closing on the new condo. So proud of my baby girl. Hard work pays off." I felt a familiar, bitter bile rise in my throat. Hard work. Brooke was 24 and worked part-time as a social media coordinator for a boutique that sold $70 candles. The down payment for that condo had not come from hard work. It had come from the bank of Denise, the same bank that was currently closed to me. I scrolled up slightly. 2 days ago, I had typed a message into this same chat. I had swallowed my pride, which was a jagged and painful thing to swallow, and written, "Hey guys, things are really tight right now. My hours got cut again. I do not know if I can make rent on the lot space next week. Is there any way I could borrow $200? I will pay it back next month." Beneath my plea for help, there were 2 small words in gray text, "Read by everyone." No one had replied. They had let the message sit there, rotting in the digital air, until my mother posted the brunch photo, effectively burying my desperation under a layer of performative joy. They did not want to hear it. To them, my poverty was a choice, a lack of ambition, a character flaw that I simply refused to correct. I was about to lock the screen when a new message popped up. It was from Brooke. "Hey Faith, are you free tomorrow afternoon? Aunt Linda needs someone to watch her pug for a few hours. Mom said you are not doing much these days since you lost the apartment. I would do it, but I have a live stream scheduled for the shop. Thanks." I stared at the words. Not doing much. Living in a car. Freezing to death. Scrounging for food. And trying not to get arrested for vagrancy apparently counted as not doing much. They did not ask where I was sleeping. They did not ask if I had eaten today. They just assumed I was available. A free resource to be utilized because my time had no value. I did not reply. I turned the phone off and shoved it under the pillow. Buddy stirred beside me, letting out a long, groaning sigh before resting his heavy head on my ankle. I reached down and buried my fingers in his thick fur. He was warm, a living furnace in the freezing car. He was the only reason I had not driven this car off a cliff. "It is okay, Bud," I whispered, my voice raspy. "Go back to sleep." I could not go back to sleep. My mind was doing the math again, the relentless, unforgiving arithmetic of survival. Yesterday, I had worked a 4-hour shift at Happy Tail's Van Works. It was a mobile grooming service, the kind that catered to people who wanted their dogs washed but did not want to pay premium prices. I used to run my own schedule, have my own clients, but the owner, a man who smelled like stale cigarettes and bleach, had installed a new scheduling software. He said it was more efficient. What he meant was that it allowed him to squeeze 3 technicians into the schedule of 1, cutting our hours in half while keeping us on call. I had made $42. I spent $12 on gas to keep the car warm for a few hours. I spent $6 on a bag of dog food for Buddy because he could not eat the cheap stuff without getting sick. I spent $5 on a sandwich for myself. I reached into the pocket of my hoodie and pulled out the crumpled bills and loose change. I counted it by the weak light of the street lamp. 1 $5 bill, 4 singles, 3 quarters, 2 dimes, 1 nickel, $9.95. That was my net worth. If I bought a gallon of gas to run the heater tonight, I would have barely enough for food tomorrow. If I saved the money for food, we would freeze. I looked at the dashboard. The fuel gauge was dipping below the red line. I had been driving on fumes for 2 days. My eyes drifted to the rear-view mirror, where a shadow hung. It was my grooming kit, a set of professional-grade shears, clippers, and brushes in a leather roll. I had bought them 5 years ago, when I thought I was building a career. They were the last thing of value I owned. Tomorrow, I would have to pawn them. The thought made my chest ache. Without my tools, I could not pick up side jobs. Without side jobs, I could not get gas. It was a death spiral, and I was circling the drain. I looked at Buddy again. Around his neck sat a thick, dark brown leather collar. It looked out of place on him. It was old. The leather cracked in places but supple, clearly well made and cared for over decades. It had belonged to a hound dog named Buster, my grandfather's favorite hunting companion. I closed my eyes and let the memory of the funeral wash over me. It had been 8 years ago. I was 21. Grandpa Walter had died of a sudden stroke. The service was brief. My mother, Denise, had worn a black dress that cost more than my first car. She stood by the grave with dry eyes, checking her watch every 10 minutes. Afterward, at the house Walter had built with his own hands, my mother and Brooke had moved through the rooms like locusts. They were tagging furniture with sticky notes, deciding what to sell and what to trash. I had been standing in the hallway, feeling numb. Grandpa Walter was the only person who had ever looked at me and seen me. Not the disappointment my mother saw, not the competition my sister saw, just faith. My mother had walked out of his bedroom, holding a cardboard box filled with old belts and ties. She saw me and stopped, her face tightening with annoyance. "He left a mess," she said, sighing as if his death were a personal inconvenience to her. "Lawyers say he was leveraged to the hilt. Mortgages, loans. He died broke. Faith, actually, worse than broke. He died in the red." She reached into the box and pulled out the old leather collar. She dangled it by the buckle, holding it away from her body like it was contaminated. "Here," she said, thrusting it at me. "You like dogs. Take it. It is the only thing he left that is not attached to a bill collector." I had taken the collar. It felt heavy in my hands. On the brass nameplate, scratched and worn by time, were the words, "Walt and Faith, Pack for Life." I had never seen that inscription before. I ran my thumb over the metal. "He wanted you to have it," Mom said, turning away to yell at the movers. "Consider it your inheritance. Don't say I never gave you anything." That was it. A dead man's collar for a granddaughter he supposedly loved. For years. I had looked at it with a mix of affection and resentment. I loved it because it was his. I hated it because it confirmed what my mother said, that in the end, I was not worth more to him than a piece of old leather. But I kept it. And when I found Buddy shivering in a ditch 3 years ago, I put it on him. It was the only thing that fit. Now, 8 years later, that collar was resting on the neck of a dog sleeping in a car that was about to run out of gas. "Pack for life," I whispered to the empty air. "Some pack, Grandpa. We are freezing to death." I reached into the paper bag on the floorboard and pulled out the other half of the hamburger I had saved from dinner. It was cold and the bun was soggy with grease. I broke off a generous piece and held it out to Buddy. He woke up instantly, his nose twitching. He took the meat gently from my fingers, his tail thumping once against the seat. "Enjoy it, Buddy," I said, eating the rest of the bun myself. "Tomorrow is going to be a rough one." I lay back down, pulling the sleeping bag up to my chin. I tried to imagine a way out. Maybe I could donate plasma again, but the last time I went, my iron levels were too low because I had not been eating enough red meat. Maybe I could sell the spare tire. But what if I got a flat? The anxiety was a wheel spinning in the mud, going nowhere. I was just drifting into a restless doze when a sound shattered the silence. Knock, knock, knock. My eyes flew open. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was not the heavy, authoritative pound of a security guard. It was light, hesitant, but distinct. I froze. Buddy lifted his head. His ears pricked forward. A low growl started deep in his throat. I held my breath. Maybe they would go away. Maybe they were checking to see if the car was abandoned. Knock, knock. Then, a voice, low and gravelly. "I know you are in there, miss." Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I looked around for a weapon. My tire iron was in the trunk, buried under the laundry. I grabbed the only thing I had, a heavy metal water bottle. I cracked the window just a fraction of an inch. The cold air rushed in, biting my face. "Go away," I said, my voice trembling but loud. "I have a gun." I did not have a gun. I hated guns, but the lie was the only shield I had. A shadow moved near the window. I saw the silhouette of a man. He was not a cop. He was wearing a bulky jacket with a reflective stripe, the kind gas station attendants or road crew workers wore. He looked old. His posture stooped. He did not back away. He leaned closer to the glass, ignoring my threat. He was looking past me. He was looking directly at Buddy. "Easy now," the man said. His voice was not aggressive. It sounded sad. Then, he did something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He pursed his lips and let out a whistle. It was not a normal whistle. It was a specific, rhythmic pattern. 3 short, staccato notes, followed immediately by one long, rising pitch. "To-twee-twee. To." The effect on Buddy was instantaneous. The growl vanished from his throat. His ears went back, not in fear, but in recognition. He scrambled up from the seat, whining high and eager, his tail thumping a chaotic rhythm against the door panel. He pressed his nose against the crack in the window, trying to sniff the stranger. I stared at my dog. I had had Buddy for 3 years. He was protective. He did not trust strangers. He barked at the mailman. He growled at men in hats. But he was looking at this stranger like he was a long-lost friend. "How did you do that?" I whispered, forgetting about the imaginary gun. The old man stepped back slightly, allowing the light from the street lamp to hit his face. He had a weathered face, lines etched deep into his skin like a roadmap of hard living, and eyes that were sharp and blue. "That is a Walter Bryant whistle," the man said softly. "Only dogs trained by Walter know that sound. And that dog in there? He is standing exactly the way Walter's dogs used to stand, guarding the flank." He looked at me then, his eyes narrowing. "You are Faith, aren't you?" I gripped the water bottle tighter. "Who are you?" "Name is Earl," he said. "I work the night shift at the pump station across the road. I have been watching this car for 3 nights. I recognized the dog, and then I saw the collar." He pointed a calloused finger at the leather band around Buddy's neck. I used to work the kennels with your grandpa, back before his family got too fancy for the likes of us, Earl said. Walter made that collar himself, stitched it by hand. He told me once he put something inside it. My heart skipped a beat. Inside it, it is just leather. Earl shook his head slowly. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. Walter was a man who trusted dogs more than people. Faith, and he knew people lie. He told me, Earl, if Faith ever ends up with this collar, it means she is the only one left who gives a damn about the dog. He said if you were smart enough to keep the dog, you deserve what is hidden in the leather. He paused, looking around the desolate parking lot, at the fogged windows and the misery of my situation. He said, if the dog trusts her, the law will too. Earl leaned in again. Check the stitching. Faith, the thick seam on the inside. Only a Bryant who knows dogs would know where to look. He tipped the brim of his cap, turned, and began walking back toward the neon lights of the gas station across the street, leaving me alone in the dark with a happy dog and a sudden, terrifying spark of hope. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely close the window. I turned to Buddy. He was still wagging his tail, looking at me with bright, expectant eyes. Come here, boy, I said. I unbuckled the collar. The leather was warm from his body heat. I held it up to the dim light of my phone screen. It looked like a normal collar. Old, scratched, worn, but then I ran my thumb along the inside lining. Just as Earl had said, the stitching there was double-layered, thick and heavy, but right behind the buckle, there was a tiny irregularity, a place where the thread looked slightly different, slightly newer, though still years old. I dug my fingernail into the seam. The thread gave way with a soft pop. My breath caught in my throat. There was something hard underneath the leather. I pulled harder, ripping the stitches. A small metal object slid out and fell into my palm. It was a key. It was tiny, made of steel that had dulled with age. It looked like the kind of key you would use for a diary or a small padlock. I brought it closer to the light. There were markings scratched into the metal. I squinted, trying to read them. 17-RR, and below that, in letters so small I almost missed them, Red Quarry Storage. Unit 5B. I stared at the key. My grandfather had been dead for 8 years. My mother said he had lost everything. She said he was a senile old man who drank away his pension and left us with nothing but shame and debt. But senile old men do not hide keys in dog collars. Senile old men do not leave secret codes for granddaughters they are not supposed to see. I looked at the key, and then I looked at the picture of my mother and sister on my phone screen, smiling over their mimosas. My stomach tightened, not from hunger this time, but from a sudden, burning realization. My mother had lied, and whatever was in Unit 5B at Red Quarry Storage, it was enough that Walter Bryant had gone to the grave keeping it a secret from everyone but the girl who kept the dog. I am Earl Peterson, the man said, leaning back against the flickering light of the street lamp. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his grease-stained jacket. I used to run the field trials with Walter back before his arthritis set in. I was the one who held the dummy bag while he taught that dog's father how to track. I stared at him through the glass, the tiny metal key biting into the flesh of my palm. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Earl Peterson. I remembered the name vaguely, a whisper from a childhood I had been forced to forget. He was the guy who smelled like pine shavings and wet wool, the one who used to sneak me peppermint candies when my mother was not looking. You found it then, Earl said, nodding at my clenched fist. Walter always said he stitched that seam tight enough to last a nuclear winter, but loose enough for a fingernail to pop it if you knew where to look. I rolled the window down another inch. The cold air bit at my nose, but the fear was starting to recede, replaced by a burning curiosity that felt dangerous. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. I have been parking here for 3 weeks, Earl shrugged. A test is not a test if you give the answers away. Faith, Walter made me promise. He said, Earl, if the girl sells the dog, the key goes with it and she gets nothing. If she dumps the dog at a shelter, The collar gets tossed in a bin and she gets nothing. But if she keeps him, if she is starving and still feeding that mutt before she feeds herself, then she finds the key. He looked down at Buddy, who was still pressing his nose against the window, whining softly. Walt said, if a person loves a dog more than they love the easy way out, they deserve what is in the box. Earl pushed off the lamppost. He looked tired, his age showing in the slump of his shoulders. You got the key, kid. Now it is up to you to see if it fits. But I will tell you this, Walter Bryant was a lot of things. But he was never broke. He just knew who the vultures were. With that, he turned and walked back toward the gas station, his heavy boots crunching on the frost-covered asphalt. He did not look back. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the car heavy and suffocating. I looked at the key again. 17RR, Red Quarry Storage, Unit 5B. It felt like a cruel joke, a senile old man's scavenger hunt leading to a box of moth-eaten sweaters or old tax returns. My mother had been so sure. He died in the red. She had said, he left us nothing, but the weight of the key in my hand felt real, and Earl's voice had not sounded like he was lying. I looked at the gas gauge. The needle was hovering below the empty line. The warning light had been on since yesterday afternoon. Red Quarry Storage was on the other side of town, past the old industrial park where the roads were potholed and the streetlights were mostly broken. It was a 10-mile drive. If I went, and it was nothing, I would run out of gas. I would be stranded in the worst part of Cedar Ridge with a dead battery and no way to heat the car. I would lose my mobile home, my job prospects, everything. But if I stayed, I was just waiting to die slowly by attrition. Okay, I whispered to Buddy. Okay, we are doing this. I waited until the sun began to bleed gray light over the horizon. I did not want to be at Red Quarry in the dark. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then caught with a reluctant whine. I turned off the heat, the radio, and unplugged my phone charger. I needed every drop of fuel for the wheels. The drive was a white-knuckled nightmare. Every time I hit a red light, I prayed the engine would not die. I coasted down hills in neutral. I sweated through my hoodie despite the freezing temperature inside the car. Red Quarry Storage sat in the shadow of the interstate overpass, a sprawling grid of corrugated metal buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It was the kind of place people stored things they wanted to forget, or things they did not want anyone else to find. I pulled up to the gate. The engine hiccuped once and died, just as I put it in park. I had made it, but I was not leaving unless I found a miracle or a gas can. The main office was a small cinder block building that smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Behind the counter sat a woman who looked like she could bench press a truck. Her name tag read Marla Burt. She was reading a paperback romance novel and did not look up when the door chimed. ID, she said flatly. I slid my driver's license across the scratched counter. My hands were shaking. I hid them in my pockets. Marla picked up the card. She glanced at it, then did a double take. Her eyes narrowed as she looked from the plastic card to my face. Bryant, she said. It was not a question. You are Walter's kin. I am his granddaughter, I said. Faith. Marla's expression softened. Just a fraction. She put the book down. Well, I will be damned, she muttered. I thought you people had forgotten about this place, or maybe I just hoped you had. What do you mean? Your grandpa, Marla said, tapping keys on a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. He was a character. Came in here about 8 years ago, dragged a lot of heavy equipment in, then he slapped a stack of cash on this counter thick enough to choke a horse. She turned the screen toward me. He paid the lease on Unit 5B for 10 years. Up front, cash, no paper trail mailed to the house. He said, Marla, if anyone comes asking, you tell them the rent is overdue and the unit is empty, unless they have the key. She looked at me expectantly. Do you have the key? Hun? I pulled the small steel key from my pocket. Marla nodded approvingly. Unit is round the back, row E. The lock is tricky. Walter insisted on installing his own behind the facility lock. Said he didn't trust the manufacturers. My stomach did a flip. 10 years of rent. In cash. That alone was thousands of dollars. My mother had told me she had to sell his watch to pay for the cremation. I walked to Unit 5B with Buddy on his leash. The metal door was painted a peeling orange. There was a standard padlock on the hasp, but it looked new. Someone had tried to cut it at some point. There were deep scratches on the metal loop, but it had held. I tried the key Earl had helped me find. It did not fit the outer padlock. Panic flared. Had I come all this way for nothing? Then I remembered what Marla said. Behind the facility lock, I looked closely at the door mechanism. There was a small, rusted metal flap near the bottom of the track, almost invisible against the grime. I crouched down and pushed it aside. There it was, a second keyhole, recessed deep into the metal frame of the door itself. It was a custom job, something machined by hand. I slid the tiny key in. It fit perfectly. I turned it. There was a heavy, satisfying thunk as a deadbolt inside the door retracted. The outer hasp fell open uselessly. It was a decoy. The real lock had been holding the door down from the inside all along. I grabbed the handle and heaved. The door rolled up with a screech of protesting springs and rust, sending a cloud of dust into the morning air. I waved the dust away and stepped inside, Buddy pressing close to my leg. I expected boxes of junk. I expected old furniture. I did not expect an Airstream. It was a 22-foot vintage Airstream trailer, polished to a dull shine, taking up almost the entire length of the storage unit. It was sitting on blocks, the tires removed to prevent rot. It looked like a silver bullet frozen in time. Surrounding the trailer were heavy-duty plastic shelving units. They were stacked with clear bins. I saw grooming supplies, expensive ones, brands I could never afford. There were collapsible dog crates, the high-end aluminum kind used by police K9 units. There were stacks of filing cabinets. This was not a storage unit. It was a bunker. I walked to the door of the Airstream. It was unlocked. I stepped inside. The air was stale but dry. It smelled of cedar and leather. Grandpa's smell. The interior was immaculate. The wood paneling was polished. The small kitchenette was stocked with canned goods that were likely long expired. But the intent was clear. On the small dinette table, sitting squarely in the center of a lace placemat, was a thick manila envelope, written on the front in black marker, in handwriting I had not seen in 8 years, were the words for Faith. "If you still have Buddy." I sat down on the bench seat. My legs suddenly felt like water. Buddy jumped up beside me, resting his chin on the table next to the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a stack of papers and a letter written on yellow legal pad paper. "My dearest Faith, if you are reading this, it means 2 things. 1, I am dead. 2, you are stubborn. I am betting my soul that you are the one reading this, and not your mother. Denise never liked dogs. She thinks they are accessories. She thinks people are accessories too. If she had the dog, she gave him away the week after I died. If she gave him away, this key is in a landfill, and this trailer will sit here until the rent runs out and the state auctions it off. But if you are here, it means you kept the pack together. They told you I was broke. I let them think that. It is amazing what people will say in front of an old man when they think he has no power. I heard them talking. Faith. I heard Denise discussing nursing homes. I heard Brooke asking if my truck was worth selling for parts. I didn't leave you money in a will because they would have contested it. They would have dragged you through court until you were dry. So I did what I do best. I hid the trail. This unit is just the supply cache. The real work is at the old kennel on Mill Creek Road. You remember it? The one where I taught you to handle the aggressive cases. I bought the deed back 10 years ago through a shell company. It is yours. The papers are in this envelope. There is a loft above the main kennel. It has heat, water, and a bed. Go there. Get out of the cold. And Faith, there is a safety deposit box at Stone River Bank. Box number 309. The key to that is in the small safe under the sink in this trailer. But do not go there yet. Not until you are ready for a fight. I have a friend, a lawyer named Naomi Blake. She is the only shark in Montana who hates your mother more than I do. Call her when you open that box. You are not just a dog groomer, kid. You are a Bryant, and Bryants protect the pack. Love, Grandpa Walt. I lowered the letter. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. I wiped them away with my sleeve. I looked around the trailer. Heat, a bed, a place to sleep where no security guard would knock on the window, and a deed to the Mill Creek Kennel. My mother had driven past that old kennel a dozen times with me in the car, pointing at it and saying, "What an eyesore. Someone should bulldoze it." She did not know. She had no idea. I reached under the sink. There, bolted to the floor, was a small fireproof safe. I did not have the combination, but taped to the top was a note, Buddy's birthday. I typed in the numbers, 412, April 12th. The safe clicked open. Inside sat a single silver key and a business card for Naomi Blake, attorney at law. I gripped the key in my fist. I had driven in here with a dying car and $10 to my name. I was leaving with a home, a mission, and a map to a war my family did not even know had started. "Come on, Buddy," I said, standing up. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "We have to go home." The drive to Mill Creek Road was the longest 5 miles of my life. I drove with the radio off, listening to the station wagon's engine wheeze and rattle, praying it would not give up the ghost before we reached the destination. My fuel light was not just on. It was staring at me like an unblinking red eye, judging my poverty. Mill Creek Kennel sat at the very edge of Cedar Ridge, where the paved road turned into gravel and the pine trees grew thick and wild. When I was a kid, this place had been loud. It was a chorus of barks, yips, and howls, a chaotic symphony of second chances. Grandpa Walter had taken in the dogs. Nobody else wanted the biters, the runners, the ones broken by cruelty or neglect. He called it the School for Hard Knocks. Now, as I pulled up to the rusted iron gate, the silence was heavy enough to crush a person. The sign above the entrance, once a bright, hand-painted wooden arch reading Mill Creek Kennel, was gray and splintered. One side had fallen loose, swinging slightly in the cold wind with a mournful creak. The grass in the front run was waist-high, yellow and dead from the frost. It looked like a graveyard for memories. I got out of the car, my boots crunching on the gravel. Buddy stayed close to my leg, his ears swiveling. He smelled the ghosts of 1,000 dogs here, layers of scent that time could not scrub away. The main gate was secured with a heavy chain and a padlock that looked rusted shut. I did not have a key for that, but I remembered the side entrance, the one Grandpa used when he came back late from field trials. I walked around the perimeter, pushing through the overgrown blackberry bushes that snagged at my jeans. The service door to the main barn was hidden behind a stack of rotting pallets. I pulled the key, 17RR, from my pocket. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled click that felt shocking against the decay of the exterior. The door swung open. I stepped into the darkness of the barn. It smelled of dust and old hay, but underneath that, there was something else, the smell of cedar oil and pipe tobacco. Grandpa's smell. The ground floor was empty, just rows of dusty kennels with their doors standing open. But I knew where I was going. In the back corner, behind the feed room, there was a narrow staircase that led up to the hayloft. Grandpa had converted it into an office years ago, a place where he could sleep when a sick dog needed round-the-clock watch. I climbed the stairs, the wood solid and silent under my feet. At the top, there was a heavy reinforced door. The key turned here too. I pushed the door open and fumbled for the light switch on the wall, expecting nothing to happen. Electric light flooded the room. I gasped. The utilities were on. Someone or something had been paying the electric bill for 8 years. The room was not a dusty attic. It was a sanctuary. It was spotless. A small efficiency apartment that looked as if Walter had just stepped out to get a cup of coffee. There was a single bed with a military-tight woolen blanket in the corner, a small kitchenette with a hot plate, and a mini fridge that hummed softly, and in the center, a heavy oak desk that dominated the space. But it was the walls that stopped my heart. They were covered in framed photographs. Dozens of them. I walked over, my fingers hovering inches from the glass. There was Grandpa Walter in his 40s, looking handsome and rugged, shaking hands with a group of men in expensive suits standing in front of a log cabin lodge. The brass plaque on the frame read, "Grand Opening, Trail Pack Retreats, Aspen, 1998. I moved to the next one. Grandpa was sitting at a conference table, laughing. In front of him was a bag of dog food with a logo I recognized instantly, Trail Pack Living Coachers. It was a premium brand, the kind that cost $80 a bag, the kind I could never afford for Buddy. I had always thought Trail Pack was just some corporate giant. I had no idea my grandfather knew the people who ran it. There were photos of him on sets that looked like television studios, wearing a headset, directing a border collie over an agility course. "Who were you?" I whispered. "Who were you really?" I turned to the desk. It was arranged with military precision. A laptop, thick and outdated by modern standards, sat open. The power cord was plugged in, the green charging light steady. Beside it sat an old-school analog tape recorder and a stack of cassette tapes labeled with dates. And right in the center, resting on a leather blotter, was a thick legal folder. It was red, the color of urgency. The logo embossed in gold leaf on the cover said Branford and Lake, LLP, Attorneys at Law. Next to the folder was another envelope addressed to me, identical to the one in the Airstream trailer. I sat down in his leather chair. It squeaked, a familiar sound that made my chest ache. I opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in his erratic, spiky cursive. "Faith, if you made it to the loft, you know by now that I was not just a dog trainer. I was a consultant, a silent partner. Years ago, I helped design the behavioral protocols for the Trail Pack resort chain. I taught them that a dog is not a guest. A dog is a member of the family. They wanted to buy my name. I told them my name was not for sale, but my advice was, I took a royalty deal instead of a lump sum. 0.5% of gross revenue on every Trail Pack location that uses my training program. It does not sound like much, but there are 200 locations now. I put the letter down, my hands shaking violently. 0.5% of a multinational resort chain. For 20 years, the math was staggering. It was millions. I picked up the letter again. I also co-created a show called Walter and the Strays. It ran on public broadcast for 6 seasons. The residuals are small but steady. Denise thinks the show was a volunteer project. I let her think that. The money is not in a standard account. It is in a trust. And this is where it gets tricky. Kid, I knew Denise. I knew that if I left you the money directly, she would find a way to become your guardian. She would say you were too young, too irresponsible, or mentally unstable. She would drain the account before you turned 25. So, I created a condition, a codicil, the lawyers call it. The trust only activates if the beneficiary can pass the trust first test. I frowned. Trust first. It was Grandpa's mantra. You do not break a dog, you build a bridge. I read on. The condition is simple. The beneficiary must take a dog they have never met, a frightened, aggressive, or damaged dog, and within 1 hour, get that dog to voluntarily eat from their hand and lay its head on their lap. No force, no leash tension, no voice commands, just trust. If you can do it, the trust is yours. If you cannot, or if you refuse to take the test, the entire estate reverts to the secondary beneficiary, Denise Bryant. I stared at the paper. It was insane. It was brilliant. Grandpa knew my mother. Denise was terrified of dogs that were not groomed poodles. She could not get a scared dog to trust her if her life depended on it. Because animals smell artificiality, she would fail. I opened the red legal folder labeled Branford and Lake. The first document was a photocopy of the last will and testament of Walter A. Bryant. I flipped to the second page. There it was, in black and white. Article 4, the condition of inheritance. But it was the document underneath the will that made the air in the room turn ice cold. It was a photocopy of a certified mail receipt. Recipient Denise Bryant. Date received October 14th, 2017. Contents: original copy of last will and testament and notice of conditional trust. My mother knew. She had known for 8 years. She knew Grandpa did not die broke. She knew about the royalties. She knew about the test. She knew that all she had to do was wait. If she could keep me away from the will, keep me away from the truth, and prevent me from ever taking that test, the lawyers would eventually have to declare the primary beneficiary me absent or non-compliant. I looked at the date again. 2017. That was the year I dropped out of vet tech school for a semester because I could not afford the tuition. I had called her, crying, asking for a loan. She had told me, "We just do not have the money. Faith, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet." She was sitting on a lottery ticket worth millions, a ticket that belonged to me, and she let me sleep in a car. I felt a sound escape my throat, a half sob, half laugh. It was the sound of something breaking, or maybe something hardening. I reached for the small wooden box on the corner of the desk. It was locked, but the key from the Airstream fit the tiny brass keyhole. Inside lay a single, heavy silver key with a tag Stone River Bank, Box 309. Underneath the key was a laminated card, a VIP client card for the bank with Walter's signature on the back and a handwritten note on a scrap of napkin. "Faith, if you are hungry while reading this, go to the bank. Do not go to Denise. Do not go to dinner with them. Do not trust a single word that comes out of that woman's mouth. She is not your mother right now. She is the opposition." I picked up the key. It felt cold and heavy, like a weapon. I looked around the room again. The photos of the successful man I never knew, the tape recorder ready to speak his voice, the legal documents proving my mother was a fraud. This was not just an office, it was a fortress. Grandpa Walter had built a fortress of paper and legal clauses to protect me from the grave. He had known, 8 years ago, that they would try to crush me. He had known they would treat me like a stray dog, so he had left me the weapons to bite back. I stood up. I shoved the legal folder, the tape recorder, and the laptop into my backpack. I took the key to box 309 and slipped it onto the chain around my neck, right next to my own heartbeat. I looked at Buddy. He was sitting by the door, watching me with his golden eyes. He let out a soft woof. "You are right, boy," I said. My voice was steady now. The shaking had stopped. "We have work to do." I walked over to the window and looked out at the overgrown yard. I could see the roof of my station wagon parked by the gate. It looked small and pathetic from up here. "No more sleeping in the cold," I whispered. I turned off the light, plunging the room back into darkness. But I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I had the map. I had the key. And for the first time in my life, I realized I was not the poor relation begging for scraps at the family table. I was the owner of the table, and I was about to come collect the rent. The Stone River Bank was a fortress of glass and polished marble in the center of downtown Cedar Ridge, the kind of place where the air conditioning smelled like money and the silence was heavy with judgment. I walked in wearing a hoodie that had not been washed in 3 days and jeans stained with motor oil. Buddy was at my heel, his leash slack, looking more dignified than I felt. The security guard, a man whose neck was wider than his head, stepped into my path before I even reached the revolving door. "Excuse me, miss?" he rumbled, his eyes flicking to Buddy and then to the mud on my boots. "No pets allowed. And, do you have business here?" His tone said clearly. "The homeless shelter is 3 blocks east." I did not stop. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy silver key and the VIP card with Walter Bryant's signature embossed on the back. I held them up, right in his face. "I am here to access safety deposit box 309, I said, my voice sharper than intended. "And this is a service dog. He is working." Buddy was not technically a service dog, but in that moment, keeping me from screaming was a service. The guard hesitated, looking at the VIP card. The gold lettering seemed to confuse him. He stepped aside, muttering something into his radio about a situation in the lobby. Inside, the bank was hushed. Tellers spoke in whispers. I marched straight to the desk marked branch manager. A woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection looked up. Her nameplate read, Susan Miller. She scanned me with a look of polite repulsion, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she had caught a whiff of the stale car smell clinging to my jacket. "Can I help you?" she asked, her hand hovering over a silent alarm button. I placed the key on her pristine mahogany desk. Next to it, I laid the letter from Branford and Lake. "My name is Faith Bryant," I said. "I am here for my grandfather's box, Walter Bryant." Susan's eyebrows shot up. She picked up the letter, reading it quickly. Her expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, and then to something resembling panic. She typed furiously into her computer. When she looked up again, the color had drained from her face. "Mr. Bryant," she stammered. "Of course, box 309. The platinum account." She stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. "Please, come with me. Ms. Bryant, I will escort you to the vault personally. Can I get you a water coffee?" "Just the box," I said. The vault was cool and smelled of steel and secrets. Susan unlocked the inner gate and led me to a wall of numbered drawers. She used her master key, and I used mine. The lock turned with a heavy, expensive thunk. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. "I will be right outside if you need anything," she said. Closing the door, I was alone, just me, Buddy, and the metal box. I sat down and opened the lid. It was not full of cash. It was full of answers. On top sat a leather-bound notebook, a USB drive, and a single envelope with my name on it. Beneath that lay the original, notarized copy of the last will and testament. I opened the letter first. "Faith, if you are reading this, you are inside the bank. Good. That means you didn't let them stop you. If you are here, it means Denise has done exactly what I feared. She has told you I left nothing. She has told you to move on. She has probably tried to borrow money from you. Do not believe her. Do not believe the story that she could not find you. I left instructions. The lawyers were to contact her immediately upon my death. They were to give her the option to take the trust first test. If she refused or failed, they were to find you. If you are reading this years later, it means she told them you were gone. She told them you cut ties. She lied to keep the clock running, hoping the estate would default to her by abandonment. Check the USB drive. Check the dates. Love, Grandpa." I plugged the USB drive into the laptop I had brought from the loft. I opened the file named Trail Pack Royalties Master. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Rows and columns of numbers, dates. Deposits. My breath caught in my throat. The balance in the holding trust was not thousands. It was not hundreds of thousands. It was $1.4 million. And next to it was a pending offer status marked High Priority. A media conglomerate called Skyhound Media had submitted a buyout proposal for the rights to Walter and the Strays and the Trail Pack Training intellectual property. The offer was $4.2 million. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. 4.2 million. I thought about the night before. I thought about splitting a 99-cent hamburger with Buddy because I could not afford two. I thought about the frost on the inside of my car windows. I scrolled down. There was a folder of scanned emails. I opened one dated November 2017. From Branford and Lake to Denise Bryant. Dear Ms. Bryant, per our discussion, we are attempting to locate Faith Bryant to administer the conditional test as required by the will. Please provide her current contact information. The reply from my mother. Sent 2 days later. Faith has unfortunately left the state. She is dealing with some personal issues and has requested no contact with the family. She is unreachable. Please direct all future correspondence to me regarding the estate transition. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my stomach. 2017. I was living 4 miles away from her house. I was dog-sitting her neighbor's golden retriever. I had dinner at her house for Thanksgiving that year. I remembered it vividly because I had brought a pecan pie I could barely afford, and she had criticized the crust. She is unreachable, I whispered, reading the lie again. I opened another file. It was a scan of a bank transfer request from Denise Bryant to estate administrator. Subject hardship, withdrawal request. My daughter Faith is in rehab and requires significant financial assistance. As her proxy, I am requesting an emergency disbursement from the estate to cover her medical bills. The request was denied by the lawyers due to lack of proof, but the audacity of it made me nauseous. She had used my name, my imaginary addiction, to try and loot the fund. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. But not from fear, not anymore. I reached for the leather notebook. It was Grandpa's journal. I flipped through the pages until I found an entry dated 14 years ago. July 12th. The shelter brought in a pit bull mix today. Massive trauma. Bit two handlers. Everyone said put him down. Denise said he was a monster. Little Faith. She's only 15 walked into the kennel. She didn't look at the dog. She just sat down and started reading her book out loud. 10 minutes later, she was feeding him kibble by hand. The dog's head was in her lap. She has the gift. She understands that trust is a currency you have to earn. Denise thinks you buy loyalty. That is why she will never run this legacy. I wiped a tear from my cheek. He had seen me. All those years when I felt invisible, when I thought I was just the weird girl who liked animals more than people he had been watching. He had chosen me. I looked at the stack of papers, the bank statements, the emails, the lies. Then I thought about the text messages on my phone. Faith, can you lend me $200 for groceries? I will pay you back. That was from Brooke. 3 years ago, I had given it to her. I never saw it back. Faith, put the utilities in your name for the apartment. My credit is shot. That was Mom. I did it. She moved out 6 months later, leaving me with $1,000 in unpaid electric bills that wrecked my credit score and kept me from renting a decent place. They had bled me dry. They had taken my time, my money, my credit, and my self-worth. And all the while, they knew I was a millionaire. They knew Grandpa had left me everything, and they had decided to erase me to get to it. I took my phone out. I opened the camera app. I photographed every single page, every email, every bank statement. I took pictures of the will, the trust first clause, the signature cards. I emailed the files to myself, then to a new email account I created right there on the laptop. Then I uploaded them to a cloud drive. I was not just gathering evidence, I was building a weapon. I put everything back in the box, except for the copies I needed. I looked at Buddy, who was sleeping on the expensive carpet of the viewing room. "Wake up, Buddy," I said softly. "We are done being the charity case." I walked out of the vault. Susan Miller was waiting, looking anxious. "Did you find everything satisfactory, Ms. Bryant?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes," I said, "but I have a question." "Anything." "Does my mother, Denise Bryant, have access to this box?" Susan checked her clipboard. "She is listed as a secondary contact, but no access privileges without the primary key holder's consent. However, she has inquired several times. She tried to have the box drilled last month, claiming the key was lost. And we refused. The protocols Mr. Bryant set up are extremely strict." "Good," I said. "Keep refusing. If she comes in here, you tell her the key has been found, and tell her the owner checked in." I walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun. The air smelled of exhaust and cold pavement, but for the first time in years, it didn't smell like despair. I had $4.2 million waiting for me. I had a deed to a property, and I had proof of fraud that could send my mother to prison. But I was not going to the police yet. Not just yet. I needed a shark. Grandpa had mentioned a name in his letter. Naomi Blake. I pulled up the search bar on my phone and typed in the name. Naomi the Butcher Blake, estate litigation, family law. We don't just win, we eviscerate. I smiled. It was a cold, grim smile. "Come on, Buddy," I said, opening the door of the station wagon. "Let's go hire a butcher." The gravel driveway of Second Chance Ranch crunched loudly under the tires of my station wagon. It was a sound that usually signaled arrival, but today it sounded like the opening bell of a fight I was finally ready to start. Walter's letter had been specific. Find Ralph Dawson. If Buddy trusts him, you should too. The ranch was located on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge, in a valley where the wind always seemed to be blowing. It was poor, you could see that in the peeling paint on the main barn and the mismatched fencing, but it was meticulously clean. There was no smell of waste, only the scent of bleach, pine, and wet earth. I parked next to a rusted pickup truck. Buddy sat up in the back seat. His ears perked, a low whine vibrating in his throat. A man walked out of the barn. He was tall and thin, built like a piece of dried jerky, with skin that had been tanned to the color of old saddle leather. He wore a faded denim shirt and a baseball cap pulled low. He stopped when he saw my car, his hand resting instinctively on the gate latch. I stepped out, letting Buddy out with me. Without thinking, I put 2 fingers to my lips and blew the command Walter had taught me a lifetime ago, the heel and focus signal. Twee, 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 too. Buddy immediately stopped sniffing the grass and trotted to my left side, sitting down and looking up at me. The old man froze. His eyes, which were a startlingly bright blue, widened. He looked at Buddy, then at me, and then back at the dog. Only one man ever used that cadence, the man said. His voice was like grinding stones, and he has been dead 8 years. I am his granddaughter, I said. I am Faith. The man, Ralph Dawson, stared at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Buddy again. He crouched down, extending a hand, palm up. Buddy didn't hesitate. He walked over and nudged his nose into Ralph's palm, his tail wagging in a slow, rhythmic beat. He is a Bryant dog. All right, Ralph said softly, scratching Buddy behind the ears. He has got the stance. You must be the girl, the one Walt talked about when he got deep into the whiskey. He stood up and wiped his hand on his jeans. You look like him around the eyes, but you look like you have gone 12 rounds with a grizzly bear. I feel like it, I admitted. Come inside, Ralph said. Coffee is fresh, and it looks like you have got a story to tell. Inside the small office attached to the barn, surrounded by bags of kibble and stacks of towels, I told him everything. I put the collar on the desk. I laid out the key, the photos of the Airstream, the letter from the loft, and the terrifying math of the bank account. I told him about sleeping in the car. I told him about the text messages from my mother, the scene receipts, the way they had erased Walter from their lives while waiting for his money to legally become theirs. Ralph listened without interrupting. He drank his black coffee, his face becoming harder and harder, like setting concrete. When I finished explaining the trust first clause and the deception regarding my whereabouts, Ralph set his mug down with a slam that made me jump. Denise, he spat the name out like a curse word. I told Walt. I told him she was a viper. He said, Ralph, she is family. I said, Walt, cancer is genetic too. That doesn't mean you keep it. He stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet that looked like it had survived a war. He rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a small, heavy cardstock business card. He slid it across the desk to me. It was black with white text, no logo, no scales of justice, just a name and a number, Naomi Blake. Attorney at law. They call her the Butcher, Ralph said. She represented Walt when he sued a breeder for running a puppy mill in the 90s. She stripped that guy of everything he owned, down to his socks. She hates bullies, and she hates liars. Call her. Tell her Ralph sent you. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an office located above a fried chicken joint on the sketchy side of town. The air smelled faintly of grease and expensive perfume. Naomi Blake did not look like a butcher. She looked like a librarian who had snapped. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with sharp features and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She was wearing a tailored suit that cost more than my car. Sitting behind a desk buried under mountains of paper, she listened to me for 20 minutes. She looked at the photos of the documents I had taken at the bank. She read the will 3 times. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. Her eyes were terrifyingly intelligent. Your mother, Naomi said, her voice crisp and precise, is not just a bad parent. She is a criminal. This is textbook fraud. It is tortious interference with an inheritance. She knowingly concealed a will, made false statements to the executors regarding your location, and attempted to defraud the estate by claiming you were an addict. She leaned forward. And the best part? She did it all while you were living in the same zip code. Naomi picked up the copy of the Trust First clause. "This is not just a sentimental request," she said, tapping the paper. "This is a condition precedent. In contract law, it is a specific event that must occur before a duty to perform arises. Walter made the inheritance contingent on a skill test, a test he knew Denise could never pass. Because she hates dogs," I said. "Because she has no empathy," Naomi corrected. "Animals are the ultimate lie detectors. Walter knew that. He weaponized it." She stood up and grabbed her coat. "We need to lock this down, tonight. But first, we need to cement your claim. The court will want proof that this Trust First test is a valid, measurable standard, not just Grandpa's whim. We need to prove it is technical, repeatable, and that you are the only one who holds the patent on the method." "How do we do that?" I asked. "We go back to the ranch," Naomi said, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. "And we make a movie." We drove back to Second Chance Ranch as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple, and the wind was cutting through my hoodie. Ralph met us at the gate. He nodded at Naomi. "Butcher?" "Ralph," she replied. "I need the hardest case you have got. Not a biter, but a fear case. I need a dog that thinks humans are the devil." Ralph nodded grimly. "I have got a shepherd mix in Run 4. Animal control brought him in 3 days ago. They found him chained to a radiator in a foreclosed house. He has not eaten. He won't let anyone near the gate without trying to take their hand off." "Perfect," Naomi said. She pulled out a professional-grade camera from her bag. "Faith, you are up. I want you to do exactly what Walter taught you. Do not rush it. I need the judge to see the process." I followed Ralph to Run 4. The dog inside was a shadow in the corner. He was large, gaunt, his ribs showing through matted black and tan fur. When he saw us, he didn't bark. He let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in the concrete floor. His hackles were raised, and his eyes were wide with terror and rage. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was exhausted. I had eaten 1 hamburger in 48 hours. My hands were shaking from low blood sugar. "Take a breath, kid," Ralph whispered. "He is just scared. Fear is just a question he doesn't know the answer to." I nodded. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold air. I pushed the hunger and the exhaustion away. I channeled Grandpa Walter. "Trust first." I unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside. Naomi was filming from outside the mesh. The dog lunged, snapping his jaws inches from my leg. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I simply turned my body sideways, breaking eye contact, making myself small. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the concrete, my legs crossed, my hands resting loosely on my knees. I became a statue. "Time start," Naomi whispered for the camera. I ignored the dog. I stared at a spot on the wall. I began to hum, a low, melodic sound, just a vibration in my chest. The dog paced. He growled. He sniffed the air. Confused by my lack of aggression, 5 minutes passed. The cold from the concrete was seeping into my bones. Then I moved my hand. Slow, glacial. I tossed a tiny piece of high-value treat-dried liver Ralph had given me halfway between us. The dog froze. He looked at the treat. He looked at me. I didn't look back. I just gave the whistle. Softly, tweet, 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 too. It was a sound of safety, a sound that said, "I am here, but I demand nothing." The dog took a step, then another. He snatched the treat and scrambled back to his corner. I tossed another one, closer this time. "Good choice," I whispered. "Smart boy." 10 minutes. 15. The dog was now standing 3 feet away. His hackles were down. The growl was gone, replaced by a heavy, curious breathing. I held the last piece of liver in my open palm, resting on my knee. This was the moment. If he bit me, I failed. If he ran, I failed. The shepherd stepped forward. He stretched his neck. sniffing my fingers. I could feel his hot breath on my skin. He took the treat, his teeth grazing my palm but not breaking skin. Then, he did the impossible. He didn't retreat. He let out a long, shuddering sigh, the sound of adrenaline leaving the body, and lowered his heavy head. He rested his chin on my knee, looking up at me with eyes that were no longer black with rage, but soft and amber. I reached out and slowly, gently, stroked the velvet fur behind his ear. "I got you," I whispered. "You are safe." "Cut," Naomi said. Her voice was tight. I looked up. Ralph was wiping his eyes. Naomi was saving the file on her camera with a look of pure triumph. "That," Naomi said, pointing at the screen, "is $1 million piece of cinema." She helped me up. My legs were numb, and I stumbled slightly. "Okay," Naomi said, switching into general mode. "Here is the play. That video proves you possess the proprietary skill set required by the will. Ralph and I will sign affidavits attesting to the test." We walked back to her car, leaving the shepherd who Ralph promised to give a double portion of dinner resting peacefully. "I am filing an emergency petition with the Cedar Ridge Probate Court tonight," Naomi explained as she opened her laptop on the hood of her car. "We are asking for a temporary restraining order on all estate assets. We are freezing the bank accounts, the royalty stream, and the Skyhound negotiations." "What about my mother?" I asked. "We are going to serve her," Naomi said, her eyes gleaming in the dark. "But not just with papers. We are going to bait a trap." She looked at me. "Your mother and sister live on their phones, right? Perception is reality for them." "Yes," I said. "If it is not on Instagram, it didn't happen." "Good," Naomi said. "Then we are going to hit them where they live. I want you to post a clip of that video. Just a small part. No context about the money, no mention of the will, just you, the dog, and a caption about your grandfather." "Why?" "Because," Naomi said, "fraud requires intent. We have the documents showing they lied to the lawyers. But I want a jury or a judge to see their character. I want them to admit, in their own words, that they think you are worthless. I want them to incriminate themselves before they even know they are being sued." She tapped a key on her keyboard, sending the initial draft of the petition to the courthouse server. "They think you are a ghost. Faith, tonight, we start haunting them." I looked down at my phone. I had the video file Naomi had transferred to me. I opened my social media app, which had been dormant for months. I uploaded the clip of the shepherd resting his head on my knee. I typed the caption, "Grandpa. I still remember how you taught me to listen to the scared ones." I hit post. "Now," Naomi said, starting the car. "We wait, and while we wait, I am going to teach you how to destroy a liar without ever raising your voice." The notification light on my phone blinked. Once, twice, then it became a steady, pulsing rhythm. I sat in the passenger seat of Naomi Blake's sedan, staring at the screen. I had posted the video from Second Chance Ranch 2 hours ago. It was a simple clip, just the shepherd resting his heavy head on my knee, his amber eyes closing in relief, with the caption, "Grandpa. I still remember how you taught me to listen to the scared ones." It had gone viral locally. People in Cedar Ridge loved a tearjerker involving dogs. The comments were pouring in. "So touching. Is that the Bryant girl I remember her grandfather's show?" But the family crew group chat had been radio silent. "Give it time," Naomi said from the driver's seat. She was eating a protein bar with the precision of a surgeon. "Narcissists need to assess how a situation reflects on them before they react. Right now, they are trying to figure out if they can spin this." 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed. "Mom." "Oh, honey, this is beautiful. I'm crying right now at work. So proud of you." 2 seconds later. "Brooke, OMG. Faith, you have been hiding this. I did not know you were still doing the dog whisperer thing. I am actually launching a line of organic pet bandanas next month. We should totally collab." "Call me." I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. For months, they had left me on red when I begged for grocery money. Now that I had a few hundred likes on a video, I was suddenly a branding opportunity. They took the bait, Naomi said, not even looking up from her phone. Now, we reel them in. She turned to me, her expression serious. Montana is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling them. I want you to invite them to coffee, tomorrow morning, the bean mill. Why there? I asked. Because it is loud, Naomi said. It is public. They will feel safe. They will think you are desperate for their approval. And because the acoustics in the corner booth are perfect for the voice memo app on your phone, she reached into the back seat and pulled out a flannel shirt that looked like it belonged to a lumberjack. It was clean, but worn. Wear this, she said. Look tired. Look poor. Look like you are one crisis away from breaking. If they think you have power, they will guard their tongues. If they think you are defeated, they will get sloppy. The bean mill was crowded the next morning. The air smelled of roasted Arabica and burnt toast. The sound of the espresso machine hissing and the murmur of 24 conversations created a wall of white noise. I walked in wearing the borrowed flannel and my muddy boots. I had not washed my hair. I wanted to look exactly like the failure they believed I was. Denise and Brooke were already sitting in the back booth. They looked like they had stepped out of a catalog for suburban success. My mother was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my entire net worth before yesterday. Brooke was in a sharp blazer, tapping furiously on her phone. When they saw me, they stood up in unison. It was a choreographed performance of familial love. Faith, Mom exclaimed, rushing forward to hug me. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume. It was a cloying, suffocating scent. Oh, look at you. You look so tired, sweetheart. Hi, Mom, I said, letting her squeeze me. I kept my arms limp at my sides. Hey, sis, Brooke said, giving me a quick air kiss near my cheek. Love the rustic look. Very authentic. We sat down. I placed my phone on the table, screen down, the microphone facing them. The recording app was already running. I saw the video, Mom said, clasping her hands on the table. Her eyes were wide and shimmering with performative concern. It just broke my heart. It reminded me so much of your grandfather. You have his gift. Faith. You really do. Thanks, I muttered, staring at my black coffee. I missed him. We all do, Brooke sighed, checking her Apple Watch. So, listen, I was thinking about this partnership. You handle the cute dog content. I handle the marketing. We could split the revenue 60-40, since, I am doing the back-end work. I looked at her. I am living in my car. Brooke? The table went silent for a beat. This was the reality check they hated. It ruined the aesthetic. Mom reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was soft, uncalloused. That is actually what we wanted to talk to you about, she said, her voice dropping to a hushed, serious tone. We are so worried about you. Faith, living like that. It is not safe. It is not stable. And honestly, it suggests that maybe you are not in the best place mentally. Here it comes. I thought, the gaslighting. I am fine. Mom, I am just broke. Are you? She asked, tilting her head. Because normal people do not choose to sleep in a parking lot. Look, your father and I, well, mostly me, we talked. We want you to come stay at the house for a few weeks, just to get back on your feet. I felt a flicker of surprise. Really? Of course, she smiled. The living room couch is yours, but there is a condition. I waited. You cannot bring the dog, she said. My blood ran cold. Buddy, I said. He is all I have. He is a burden. Faith, Brooke chimed in. He is huge. He sheds. And honestly, if you are trying to get a job and turn your life around, you cannot be tethered to an animal like that. We found a great shelter in the next county. No kill, mostly. We can board him, Mom added quickly, seeing the look on my face, or rehome him It is for your own good. Honey, you need to focus on you. You cannot take care of a dog when you cannot even take care of yourself. It was a power move. They wanted to strip me of my only support system, and, whether they knew it or not, they wanted to separate me from the collar. I will think about it, I lied. I do not know if I can let him go. Well, think fast, Brooke said, picking at a croissant. So, speaking of Grandpa, that video got me thinking. The show rights, Walter and the Strays. Did you know they are running reruns on some streaming channel? It is trending. I did not know that, I said. Yeah, Brooke continued, her eyes gleaming with avarice. Mom said Grandpa died with 0 assets. But didn't he own that show? There has to be royalties, right? I mean, did he leave anything at all? She looked at me pointedly. You were the last one to see his stuff. Right before the funeral, did he give you anything besides that gross old collar? I took a sip of my coffee to hide the trembling of my lip. This was the moment. Actually, I said, keeping my voice low and uncertain. That is funny you ask. I was going through some old boxes in the attic of the Mill Creek kennel yesterday. Mom froze. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. The kennel, she asked sharply. Why were you there? That place is abandoned. I broke in, I lied easily. I needed a place to sleep that was not the car. Anyway, I found these boxes, and there were these envelopes. They had this logo on them. Branford and Lake, is that a law firm? The reaction was instantaneous. Brooke let out a snort of laughter. Oh my God. Mom kicked her under the table. I saw the table leg jerk. Ow, Brooke yelped, glaring at Mom. What? Branford and Lake represented the estate, Mom said quickly, her voice tight. They just handled the debts. Faith, it was all bills, unpaid taxes. Why were you digging through trash? I do not know, I said, playing the role of the confused, naive granddaughter. It just looked official. There was a letter about a will and something about a trust. You are confused, honey, Mom said, her smile straining at the edges. You were grieving. Sometimes the mind makes things up. There was no trust, just bankruptcy papers. That is weird, I said, leaning in. Because the date on the envelope was from 2017, 3 years after he died. Brooke rolled her eyes. She was getting impatient with the charade. She was the weak link. She was greedy. And she was lazy. And she didn't have Mom's discipline for lying. Faith, seriously, Brooke snapped. Drop it. It is junk mail. Mom threw all that stuff out years ago. I remember because I had to help her haul those heavy silver suitcases to the dumpster behind the house. My heart stopped. Silver suitcases? I asked. Mom turned to Brooke, her eyes wide with warning. Brooke, shut up. But Brooke was on a roll. She wanted to prove she knew more than me. Yeah, the fireproof ones, Brooke said, ignoring our mother. Grandpa had them in his study. Mom opened them up right after the funeral. They were full of legal crap. Deeds, contracts, whatever. She said it was all worthless garbage from a senile old man, and we pitched it. We didn't even read half of it. It was literally trash. I stared at her. You threw away signed deeds, I asked softly. It was debt, Faith, Mom hissed, her composure cracking. It was liens. I did it to protect you. I did not want you saddled with his mistakes. But the letter I saw, I pressed, pushing the knife in deeper. It said something about a conditional inheritance, something about a test. Mom's face went white, truly, ghostly white. She slammed her hand down on the table, rattling the silverware. There was no test, she snapped. There was no money. Stop living in a fantasy world. Faith, I handled the estate because I am the adult. I disposed of those papers because they were irrelevant. I told the lawyers you were gone because you were gone mentally. You were a mess. I did what I had to do. People at the nearby tables turned to look. Mom realized she had raised her voice. She took a jagged breath, smoothing her hair. I am sorry, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. I hate seeing you get your hopes up over nothing. Your grandfather was a broken man. He left nothing, and if you found some old papers in a dumpster or an attic, they mean nothing. I am the executor. I made the decisions." "You threw them away," I repeated, making sure the microphone caught it. "You threw away the will, and you told the lawyers I was gone." "I did what was best for the family," Mom said, her eyes hard as flint. "And if you want that spot on the couch, you will stop asking questions about dead men and start listening to the living." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "Call us when you get rid of the dog," she said. "Come on, Brooke." Brooke stood up, brushing crumbs off her blazer. She looked down at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Seriously, Faith," she said, "get real. There is no pot of gold. Just get a job." They walked out of the bean mill, heels clicking on the hardwood floor, leaving me sitting alone with a cooling cup of coffee. I waited until the door closed behind them. My hands were shaking, but this time, it was not from hunger, it was from adrenaline. I picked up my phone, I stopped the recording, I pressed play. Mom threw all that stuff out years ago. I had to help her haul those heavy silver suitcases to the dumpster. She said it was all worthless garbage. "I told the lawyers you were gone because you were gone. I did what I had to do." The audio was crisp, clear, undeniable. I saved the file. I named it Confession 1. I emailed it to Naomi immediately. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "We got them. That is spoliation of evidence, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. Come to the office. We are drafting the filing." I looked out the window. I saw my mother and sister getting into their white SUV. They were laughing about something. Probably about how pathetic I looked in my flannel shirt. Probably about how they had put me in my place. They had no idea that they had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. I stood up, leaving $5 on the table for the coffee I hadn't finished. I walked out into the cold morning air. Taking a deep breath, it smelled like rain. It smelled like a storm was coming. And for the first time in 8 years, I was the one bringing the thunder. Naomi Blake did not waste time. By the time I had driven back to the office from the bean mill, she had already drafted the emergency motion for a temporary restraining order. She typed with a violence that suggested she was not just writing legal arguments, but carving them out of the defendant's hides. "We are not just asking for a freeze," Naomi said, her eyes scanning the screen. "We are nuking the bridge. I am filing for an immediate injunction against Denise Bryant, Brooke Bryant, and any entities acting on their behalf. We are locking down the bank accounts at Stone River, the holding trust for Trail Pack, and the deed to the Mill Creek Kennel. If they try to buy a stick of gum with your grandfather's money after 5 o'clock today, they will be committing a felony." She hit the enter key with a decisive snap. The order was signed by Judge Price just before the courthouse closed for the day. The speed was terrifying. It was the power of evidence. The confession tape from the coffee shop where my mother admitted to throwing away the will and lying to the lawyers had been the nail in the coffin. At 6:30 in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from the bank. Alert status change. Account ending in 492 has been placed under administrative freeze per court order number CV2025. That was the account my mother used for her management fees of the estate. It was the account that paid for her Lexus and Brooks condo down payment. I sat in the passenger seat of my car, staring at the screen. I imagined the scene at my mother's house, the declined card at the grocery store, the sudden inability to transfer funds, the realization that the invisible daughter they had dismissed as a failure had just reached out from the shadows and turned off the lights. I did not go back to the parking lot that night. I drove to the Mill Creek Kennel. The loft was cold when I arrived, but it was a different kind of cold than the car. It was the chill of a house that had been waiting for its owner to return. I turned on the small electric heater Grandpa had left in the corner. The coils glowed an angry orange, slowly fighting back the damp air. I fed Buddy a bowl of the premium kibble I had found in the Airstream. He ate with a gusto that made my heart swell. For the first time in years, I wasn't counting out individual pieces of dog food to make the bag last. I lay down on the military cot, pulling the wool blanket up to my chin. The silence of the kennel was absolute. There were no security guards, no teenagers doing donuts in the parking lot, no fear of the tow truck, but I could not sleep. My mind was racing. Replaying the conversation at the coffee shop, I did what I had to do. My mother's voice, cold and unrepentant, echoed in the rafters. I drifted off sometime after midnight, my hand resting on Buddy's flank. I woke up to a sound that no dog owner ever wants to hear in the dark. It was a low, guttural growl. Buddy was standing on the bed, his hackles raised into a rigid mohawk along his spine. His ears were pitched forward, swiveling toward the heavy reinforced door that led to the staircase. I froze. The wind. A raccoon. Then I heard it. Scritch, scritch. It was the sound of metal biting into metal. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was 2:00 in the morning. This property was miles from the nearest main road. Nobody came here by accident. I slid out of bed, my feet silent on the wooden floor. I grabbed the heavy Maglite flashlight from the desk. Gripping it like a club, I signaled Buddy to stay. He was vibrating with tension, a loaded spring ready to snap. I crept to the door. Scritch, clack. Someone was trying to force the lock. I pressed my eye to the peephole. The glass was old and slightly cloudy, distorting the hallway outside into a fisheye nightmare. But I could see clearly enough. There was a figure standing on the landing. They were wearing a beige trench coat, the Burberry coat my mother had bought 3 years ago to celebrate her promotion to president of the local garden club. It was Denise. She was hunched over the doorknob. In her hand, she held a long, flathead screwdriver. She was jamming it into the space between the door and the frame, trying to leverage the deadbolt back. Her face was twisted in a grimace of exertion and panic. Her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was plastered to her forehead with sweat. She looked deranged. She wasn't here to talk. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here because the money had been cut off, and she knew the physical evidence, the tapes, the journals, the letters was inside this room. She was here to purge the archive before the lawyers could inventory it. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my chest. I had spent my life afraid of this woman. I had spent my life trying to please her, trying to be small enough so she wouldn't crush me. I was done being small. I slammed my open palm against the heavy wood of the door. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet stairwell. "I can see you," I screamed. My voice was not my own. It was deep, primal. Through the peephole, I saw her jump back as if she had been electrocuted. She dropped the screwdriver. It clattered loudly on the wooden floorboards. "You are on camera, Mom," I yelled, the lie coming easily to my lips. "The feed is live. I have already called the police. They are 3 minutes away." Denise stared at the door. Her eyes were wide, black holes of terror in the distorted glass. She looked like an animal caught in a trap. She didn't say a word. She didn't call my name. She turned and ran. I heard her boots stumbling down the wooden stairs. I heard the crash of her body hitting the banister as she slipped, then the frantic scrambling as she regained her footing. The heavy metal door downstairs slammed open, then shut. Then, the sound of an engine revving high and desperate, tires spinning in the gravel, and fading into the night. I leaned my forehead against the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was shaking, but I didn't cry. I felt something inside me crystallize. That was not my mother. That was a thief who had realized the bank vault was closed. The next morning, the sun rose cold and bright over the overgrown runs of the kennel. I was sitting at the desk, drinking black coffee, when Ralph's truck pulled up. He walked up the stairs, holding a tablet. His face was grim. "You okay, kid?" he asked, looking at the scratches on the doorframe where the screwdriver had chewed into the wood. "I am fine," I said. "She didn't get in." "I checked the perimeter cam," Ralph said. "I installed it 5 years ago when kids were sneaking in to smoke weed. It is grainy, but it works." He handed me the tablet. The video was black and white, low resolution, but the timestamps matched. 2:12 in the morning, a white SUV pulled up Denise's car. A figure got out. The coat was unmistakable. She walked to the door, looked around nervously, and pulled a tool from her pocket. Then, the retreat, the stumble on the stairs, the flight. Attempted breaking and entering, Ralph said. In Montana, that is a felony. Especially if the property is under a court order. Send it to Naomi, I said. My voice was flat. My phone pinged. It was an email from Naomi. The subject line read, Urgent preservation of evidence motion filed. I opened the email. Faith, look at this. It was sent to the general inquiry inbox for the Walter and the Strays fan page last night at 3 a.m. Whoever sent it is sloppy and desperate. Attached was a forwarded email from legal admin temp44 protonmail.com to info Walter and the Strays, org. Subject immediate cash offer, intellectual property buyout, to whom it may concern, representing an anonymous investment group interested in acquiring total and permanent rights to the Trail Pack and Walter and the Strays brands. We are authorized to offer $300,000 in cash, payable immediately via wire transfer. Condition deal must close within 24 hours. No due diligence required. Buyer accepts all liabilities. Please reply with wiring instructions for the account linked to Box 309 at Stone River Bank to expedite. I stared at the screen. $300,000. The asset was worth over $4 million, and the royalties alone generated 6 figures annually. They are trying to sell it for scraps, I whispered. What? Ralph asked. They know the freeze is coming, I said, pointing at the email. Or they know it has already hit. This isn't a real investor. This is a fence. They are trying to liquidate the rights for pennies on the dollar just to get cash in hand before the court locks them out completely. And they messed up, Ralph noted, squinting at the text. They mentioned the safety deposit box number, Box 309. How would an outside investor know the specific box number where the deed is kept? They wouldn't, I said. Only family knows that number. My mother or Brooke had hired some bottom-feeding lawyer or a shady fixer to send this, hoping that whoever was monitoring the email, they probably thought it was an automated system, would just accept the cash. Naomi says she is filing a motion to preserve evidence, I told Ralph. She is subpoenaing Skyhound and the Trail Pack corporate office. She is demanding every single email, text, and call log from Denise and Brooke for the last 48 hours. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard I had dragged out from the corner of the room. I picked up a marker. I started writing dates. November 14th. Mom, I am hungry. Reply. Scene. November 15th. Mom buys new patio furniture, $5,000. December 1st. Faith, can you watch the dog? I sleep in the car that night. Yesterday, Denise tries to break into my house with a screwdriver. I looked at the timeline. It wasn't a family history. It was a criminal record. For years. I had made excuses for them. I told myself they were just stressed. I told myself they were grieving in their own way. I told myself I was the black sheep because I was messy and unmotivated. But looking at the board, the pattern was clear. They hadn't just neglected me. They had actively farmed me. They used me for labor when it was convenient and discarded me when I cost them money, all while sitting on a fortune that belonged to me. I took a picture of the whiteboard. I sat down at the desk and opened a fresh notebook. I wasn't writing a diary anymore. I was preparing a witness statement. Ralph, I said, not looking up. Do we have any more of those high-security padlocks? Yeah, he said. Why? I want them on every door, I said. And I want to upgrade the cameras. If she comes back, I don't want a grainy video. I want her face in high definition. I looked at the email from the investor one more time. $300,000. They thought so little of my grandfather's legacy. They thought so little of me. They thought they could sell a lifetime of love and trust for a quick payout to save their condos and their image. I picked up the phone and dialed Naomi. Faith. She answered on the first ring. I have the security footage of the break-in, I said, and I saw the email. They are trying to pawn the estate. I know, Naomi said. I have the judges on the line. We are moving the hearing up. But Faith, are you ready for this? It is going to get ugly. They are cornered rats now. I looked at Buddy, sleeping by the heater, safe and warm. I touched the collar around his neck, the collar that had saved my life. "Let it get ugly," I said. "I am not the one holding the screwdriver." The Cedar Ridge probate court was smaller than I expected. It was a single room with beige walls that had not been painted since the 90s, smelling faintly of floor wax and old paper, but the air inside was thick enough to choke on. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Naomi. She was wearing a navy blue suit that looked like armor, her posture rigid. Across the aisle sat my family. My mother, Denise, was dressed in a modest black cardigan and Pearl's the grieving daughter costume. Brooke was next to her, looking bored and annoyed, scrolling on her phone under the table until the bailiff told her to put it away. Next to them was their lawyer, Greg Hartman. I knew Hartman by reputation. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to bully someone into a settlement. He was slick, tanned even in winter, and he had a smile that did not reach his eyes. When we made eye contact, he smirked a small, dismissive twitch of his lips that said, "You are out of your league, little girl." Judge Elena Price entered the room. She was a stern woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She did not look like someone who enjoyed wasting time. "We are here to hear the emergency petition regarding the estate of Walter A. Bryant," Judge Price said, her voice dry as dust. "Mr. Hartman, you are challenging the validity of the conditional clause." Hartman stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, we are not just challenging it. We are calling it what it is, a senile fantasy." He gestured grandly toward me. "The opposing counsel wants this court to believe that a multi-million-dollar estate should be decided by a dog trick. This so-called trust first test is vague, subjective, and frankly ridiculous. It relies on the mood of an animal, not the letter of the law. Mr. Bryant was clearly not in his right mind when he wrote a clause valuing a dog's feelings over his own daughter's well-being." Hartman chuckled, looking back at Denise for approval. Denise dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. "It is an emotional whim, Your Honor," Hartman continued. "It is unmeasurable. How do you measure trust? Is it a wagging tail, a bark? It is absurd to base legal inheritance on such ambiguity." I felt my face heat up. They were turning Grandpa's life work into a joke. Naomi stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. "Mr. Hartman seems to think animal behavior is magic. It is not. It is science. And Walter Bryant was not a magician. He was a pioneer in behavioral conditioning." She picked up a remote control. "We submit into evidence Exhibit A video recording dated 2 days ago at Second Chance Ranch, and we call Mr. Ralph Dawson to the stand." Ralph walked up, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly 20 years old. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. "I have been a certified canine behaviorist for 30 years. Ralph stated for the record, "I worked with Walter Bryant for 10 of them." Naomi played the video on the courtroom monitors. It was the footage of me and the terrified shepherd mix. The room went silent as they watched the dog lunge, snap, and growl. "Mr. Dawson," Naomi asked, "what are we seeing here?" "That is a level 5 fear response," Ralph said, pointing at the screen. "The dog is in fight-or-flight mode. His cortisol levels are through the roof. He is dangerous." The video played on. It showed me sitting down. It showed the humming. It showed the slow, deliberate movements. "And now?" Naomi asked, as the video showed the dog eating the liver from my hand. "That is a total autonomic shift," Ralph explained. "The dog's parasympathetic nervous system has engaged. He has moved from reaction to cognition. He is thinking, not just fearing. That transition, getting a dog to switch systems in under 20 minutes, is the hallmark of the Bryant method." Naomi paused the video right at the moment the dog laid his head on my knee. "Is this a trick, Mr. Dawson?" "No," Ralph said firmly. "A trick is a command. Sit, stay. This is a physiological state of trust. It is measurable. You can see the pupil dilation change. You can see the muscle tension release. It is as scientific as a blood pressure reading. Hartman shifted in his seat. His smirk was gone. Naomi wasn't done. We also submit Exhibit B audio recordings from the personal archives of Walter Bryant. She pressed a button. Grandpa's voice, raspy and familiar, filled the courtroom. If the dog does not trust, it only obeys because of fear. Fear breaks a dog. Trust builds a pack. Any fool can beat a dog into submission. But only a true handler can talk a scared dog down from a ledge. Whoever demands obedience without earning it, they are not my heir. They are just a dictator. I looked at my mother. She was staring straight ahead. Her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. She knew that voice. She knew he was talking about her. Naomi pulled up a document on the screen, the will itself. The clause is specific, Your Honor, Naomi argued. It demands 3 criteria: cessation of trembling, voluntary food acceptance, and physical contact initiated by the animal. Faith Bryant met all 3 criteria with a strange, aggressive animal. This is not vague. It is a technical standard. Naomi then played a split-screen video. On the left was my test. On the right was grainy footage from the 90s Grandpa Walter doing the exact same thing with a snarling Doberman. The body language was identical. The timing was identical. The result was identical. This is not luck, Naomi said. This is inherited expertise. Hartman stood up again, looking flustered. Objection, he stammered. The claimant could have simply memorized these old tapes. She has had access to the archives for days. She is just mimicking a performance she saw on a screen. Naomi smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. Actually, Mr. Hartman, Naomi said sweetly, that footage of Mr. Bryant on the right, it was never broadcast. It was found in the safety deposit box at Stone River Bank, a box that your client, Ms. Denise Bryant, never had access to, and the box in the Mill Creek loft. Where Faith found the other tapes, it was locked until 3 days ago. She turned to the judge. Faith Bryant could not have studied these tapes because her mother threw the keys away 8 years ago. The only way Faith knows this method is because Walter taught her himself when she was a child, or because she simply has the heart he was looking for. Judge Price leaned back in her chair, taking off her glasses. She looked from me to Denise, and then down at the evidence. Mr. Hartman, the judge said, your argument that the condition is invalid holds no water. The court recognizes the Trust First Clause as a specific, behavior-based condition precedent. It is eccentric, yes, but it is legally sound. She turned to me. Ms. Bryant, the court is impressed by the evidence. However, my stomach tightened. However, the word that always came before the bad news. The video of your test was conducted after you had accessed the storage unit and the loft, Judge Price noted. While I believe Ms. Blake's timeline, there is a window of doubt. Mr. Hartman could argue on appeal that you found instructions in the loft before the test. She tapped her pen on the desk. To make this ruling bulletproof to permanently enact the trust and transfer the assets, I need one final piece of the puzzle. I need proof that Walter Bryant was of sound mind when he created this entire labyrinth. And I need definitive proof that he intended you, specifically Faith Bryant, to find it, regardless of the timeline. She looked at Naomi. I am extending the temporary restraining order for another 14 days. The assets remain frozen. Ms. Faith Bryant is recognized as the sole potential beneficiary pending final verification, but if you want me to hand over the keys to a $4 million kingdom and dismiss the mother's claim entirely, bring me the smoking gun. Naomi nodded. Understood. Your Honor. Judge Price banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. As we walked out, Denise brushed past me in the aisle. She didn't look at me. She hissed under her breath, loud enough only for me to hear. You are going to lose, Faith. You always lose. You are just a stray he felt sorry for. I stopped. I turned to look at her. Strays survive, Mom, I said quietly. House pets get eaten. Outside the courthouse, The winter air was crisp. I took a deep breath. "We did good," Naomi said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "But the judge is right. Hartman will appeal. He will say Walter was crazy. He will say you manipulated the timeline. We need the final nail." "What nail?" I asked. "We have the will. We have the tapes. We need the go bag," Naomi said. "Walter was a planner. He didn't just leave breadcrumbs. He left a map. In every spy movie, in every heist story, there is always a go bag, the emergency kit with the fake passports and the cash. Walter has one. I know it." She looked at me. "Think, Faith, where is the one place we haven't looked? The one place that connects everything?" I thought about the collar, the key, the Airstream, the loft, the bank. Then I remembered something Brooke had said at the coffee shop, something about silver suitcases and trash. But there was something else, a phrase in Grandpa's letter from the Airstream. "If you are reading this, you are stubborn." And something Earl had said. Walter always said he stitched that seam tight enough to last a nuclear winter. "The Airstream," I said. "The floor." "What?" "In the Airstream," I said, my mind racing. "There was a rug, a thick, ugly shag rug that didn't match the rest of the interior. It was bolted down. I tripped on it when I first went in." Naomi's eyes lit up. "Bolted down?" "Yeah," I said. "Who bolts a rug to the floor of a trailer?" "A man hiding a floor safe." Naomi grinned. "Let's go." We got into her car. I looked back at the courthouse. My mother and Brooke were standing on the steps, arguing with Hartman. They looked small. They looked desperate. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They were playing checkers. Grandpa Walter had been playing three-dimensional chess from the grave for 8 years, and I was about to make the final move. We arrived at Red Quarry Storage under a sky that was heavy and gray, threatening snow. The Airstream trailer sat in the gloom of Unit 5B like a dormant spaceship. The air inside was freezing, the kind of cold that settles into metal and stays there. Naomi stood by the door, watching as Ralph and I got to work. Ralph had brought his toolkit. "Brooke said silver suitcases," Ralph grunted, kneeling on the floor of the trailer. Walt didn't use suitcases for anything important, but he did like hidden compartments. He used to build false bottoms in the transport crates so he could smuggle his good whiskey into dry counties. I pointed to the shag rug that covered the center of the floor. It was an ugly thing, a matted brown rectangle that looked like it had been salvaged from the 70s. I had tripped over the corner of it the first day I found the trailer. "Here," I said. "The corners are screwed down with washers." Ralph pulled out a power drill. The sound of the motor whining against the screws was deafening in the small space. One by one, the fasteners came loose. We pulled the rug back. Beneath it, cut precisely into the plywood subfloor, was a rectangular steel plate. It was flush with the wood, painted matte black to blend in with the shadows. In the center was a small keyhole. My hand went instinctively to my neck, where I had hung the second key Earl had helped me find the tiny one from the collar that hadn't fit the bank box. I unclasped the chain and knelt down. My breath plumed in front of my face. I slid the key in. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. The plate popped up on hydraulic hinges, revealing a shallow, fireproof safe embedded between the trailer's frame rails. "Bingo," Naomi said softly. Inside, there was no cash. There were no diamonds. There were just papers, 2 thick, leather-bound notebooks, a manila folder with the Skyhound logo, a small digital voice recorder, and a single, thin envelope with my name on it. I lifted the contents out as if they were holy relics. We moved to the small dinette table where the light was better. "These aren't diaries," Ralph said, opening the first notebook. "These are training logs." He was right. The pages were filled with Walter's handwriting, meticulous, organized, and incredibly lucid. They weren't the ramblings of a senile old man. They were the blueprints of a genius. He had diagrammed every single episode of Walter and the Strays. He had written out the behavioral theory behind every technique. He had sketched out the signature sequences, the specific combinations of whistles and hand signals. that were now the intellectual property of the Trail Pack brand. At the bottom of every single page, he had signed his name, Walter A. Bryant, followed by the date. He copyrighted it, Naomi said, her voice filled with professional admiration, by signing and dating every page of the original creative work. He created a time-stamped record of creation. This proves he was not only of sound mind, but that he was actively managing his intellectual property right up until the end. She picked up the Skyhound folder. "Look at this," she said. "It is a draft contract. From 8 years ago," I read the cover page. "Acquisition proposal Trail Pack method and media library. Offer price $2,800,000. There was a clause highlighted in yellow marker. In the event of the licensor's death, all pending payments and future royalties shall bypass the general estate and be deposited directly into the trust designated for the primary beneficiary." "He knew," I whispered. "He knew they would try to take it. He specifically wrote a clause to bypass the general estate so Mom couldn't touch it as executor." "But why didn't he sign it?" Ralph asked. "Because he was waiting for me," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I picked up the thin envelope. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, dated 3 weeks before he died. "To Faith, if you find this letter yourself, it means the system worked. It means you are smart, and you are stubborn, and you love the dog. I have been waiting for you all summer. Kid, every weekend. I sit on the porch and watch the driveway. Denise tells me you are busy. She says you have summer school. She says you are playing soccer. She says you are living the teenage dream, and you do not have time to smell like wet dog and listen to an old man ramble. My lawyer, Branford, God rest his soul, tells me I have to accept it. He says teenagers grow apart from their grandparents. He says it is natural, but I do not believe it. I know you, Faith. I know the girl who sat in a kennel with a bleeding pit bull for 4 hours. That girl doesn't just stop caring because she got a driver's license. So, I am making a bet against your mother. I am betting everything I have, the money, the show, the legacy, that she is lying. I am betting that you are not too busy. I am betting that she is keeping you away. If I am wrong, and you really did just move on, well, then Denise gets the money, and she can buy all the shoes she wants. But if I am right, if you find this, then I know you never left me, and I never left you. Love, Grandpa." I dropped the letter. I put my head in my hands and sobbed. It wasn't a gentle cry. It was a raw, ugly sound that tore out of my throat. I remembered that summer. I was 21, not a teenager, but to him, I was always a kid. I had begged my mother to let me visit him. I had asked for the keys to the car. "Grandpa is not feeling well today. Faith, he doesn't want visitors. The car is acting up. Honey, you cannot drive it to the kennel. I went to see him. Faith, he was sleeping. He didn't even ask about you. He's getting confused. Let me take his birthday present for you. You stay here and study. You need to focus on your future." She hadn't just stolen the money. She hadn't just stolen the house. She had stolen the last summer I could have had with him. She had let him die thinking I didn't care enough to visit. She had let him die waiting on a porch for a car that was never going to come. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Ralph. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed my shoulder hard. His own eyes red-rimmed. Naomi picked up the digital voice recorder. She pressed play. The audio was tinny but clear. It sounded like it was recorded in a car or a small room. "Testing. October 12th. Note to file." Grandpa's voice. "I spoke to Denise today. She is pushing for power of attorney again. She says I'm losing my grip. She says I forgot to pay the property tax. I didn't forget. I paid it in cash last week. She is gaslighting me. I know that is the word the kids use now. Gaslighting." A pause. The sound of a lighter clicking. Then a slow exhale. "She told me Faith is failing her classes. Said she is hanging out with a bad crowd. Said she needs money for rehab. I asked for proof. She got angry. Said I didn't trust my own family. I told her I trust my dog more than I trust her. She didn't like that." Another pause. "If anything happens to me, If I die suddenly, check the toxicology and check the accounts. She is desperate. Desperate people bite. The tape clicked off. The silence in the airstream was absolute. She told him I was on drugs, I said, my voice cold and dead. She told him I was failing. I was on the dean's list that semester. I was working 2 jobs. She was poisoning the well, Naomi said. She was trying to convince him you were unfit, so he would change the will voluntarily. When that didn't work, she switched to Plan B suppression. Naomi began organizing the documents into a stack. Her movements were precise, lethal. This is it, she said. This is the go bag. This proves 3 things beyond a shadow of a doubt. She held up one finger. 1, Walter was mentally competent. The notebooks prove he was generating high-level intellectual property and managing complex finances right up until his death. Hartman's argument that he was senile is dead in the water. 2 fingers. 2. He specifically designed this system to bypass Denise because he suspected her of fraud. This isn't an accidental omission. It is a deliberate protective measure. The intent is explicit. 3 fingers. 3. Denise's actions were not just opportunistic, they were predatory. She actively isolated a vulnerable senior citizen from his support network, using lies and manipulation. That is elder abuse, and that invalidates her claim to being a dutiful executor. We can petition to have her removed not just as a beneficiary, but to have her stripped of any executory fees she has already collected. Naomi looked at me. We have enough here to put her in prison. Faith, at the very least, we have enough to destroy her in civil court. We can take everything, the house, the condo, the car, every dime she stole. I looked at the letter again. I am betting that you are not too busy. I wiped my face. The sadness was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. She made him think I abandoned him, I said. She let him die lonely. I stood up. I picked up the collar from the table, running my thumb over the nameplate. Pack for life. I want to go to court, I said. I want to finish this. We will, Naomi said. But first, we are going to update the valuation. She tapped the Skyhound folder. This offer was $2.8 million 8 years ago. With the streaming numbers Brooke mentioned, with the brand revival, Skyhound offered $4.2 million last week. But once we show them these notebooks, once we show them that we have the original, handwritten source code for the entire method, the price goes up. She smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. We are going to walk into that courtroom with a $6 million asset and a smoking gun that proves your mother tried to steal it with a screwdriver. We packed the documents into the safe. We locked the airstream. As we drove away from Red Quarry Storage, I looked out at the gray sky. It was starting to snow. I thought about my mother. I thought about how she must be panicking right now, watching her accounts freeze, wondering how much we knew. She had spent her life curating an image of perfection. She had built a wall of lies to keep the world out and the money in. But she forgot one thing. She forgot that walls work both ways. They keep things out, but they also trap you inside. And I had the key to the demolition crew. The air in the Cedar Ridge probate court was heavy, vibrating with the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. This was it, the final hearing. Judge Elena Price looked down from the bench. She did not look tired today. She looked like a woman who was done with riddles. Ms. Blake, the judge said, her voice cutting through the room. In our last session, I asked for a final piece of evidence. I want to know why Mr. Bryant would bypass his own daughter for a granddaughter he hadn't seen in years. And I want to know why the respondent, Ms. Denise Bryant, seems terrified of a simple behavioral test. Naomi stood up. She didn't bring a folder this time. She brought the black steel box from the Airstream trailer. Your Honor, Naomi said, we are ready to answer that. She walked to the evidence table. We present into evidence the contents of the safety deposit box found concealed beneath the floorboards of Mr. Bryant's personal trailer, a box that Denise Bryant did not know existed. Naomi laid out the 2 leather notebooks. First, these training logs. Every page is dated and signed by Walter Bryant. They detail the creation of the trust-first methodology. They prove that up until 3 days before his death, Walter Bryant was not only sane, but was actively managing a multi-million-dollar intellectual property. She placed the Skyhound contract next to them. Second, this unexecuted contract from 8 years ago, note the highlighted clause, bypass general estate. Walter Bryant explicitly tried to sell his company before he died, solely to ensure the liquid assets would go into a trust that his daughter could not touch as executor. He was not protecting the money from the government, Your Honor. He was protecting it from her. Denise shifted in her seat. Her face was pale, tight with tension. And finally, Naomi said, holding up the small digital recorder. The court asked why he chose faith. The answer is in his own words. Naomi pressed play. The sound of my grandfather's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the courtroom. She told me Faith is failing her classes, said she is hanging out with a bad crowd, said she needs money for rehab. I asked for proof. She got angry. I told her I trust my dog more than I trust her. The recording continued, playing the part where he described waiting on the porch for a car that never came because my mother told him I was too busy living the teenage dream. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the table, her hands gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She refused to look at me. He died believing his granddaughter had abandoned him, Naomi said softly, but he still left her the key. He bet everything on the hope that his daughter was lying, and he was right. Greg Hartman, the opposing lawyer, stood up slowly. He looked like a man trying to stop a dam from bursting with a piece of chewing gum. Your Honor, Hartman said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. This is compelling, but it is also ancient history. These are the ramblings of a paranoid man recorded 8 years ago. Look, this family has been through enough. My client, Ms. Denise Bryant, is willing to offer a compromise. He gestured to me with a fake, benevolent smile. We propose a 50-50 split of the assets. We will drop the challenge to the will. Faith gets half. Denise gets half. It is fair. It heals the family rift. Let us not let money destroy a mother-daughter bond. Denise let out a sob. It was a practice sound, one I had heard 1,000 times before. She looked up at the judge, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please, Your Honor, she wept. I just want my daughter back. I made mistakes. I was stressed. I was grieving. But I am her mother. I want to help her. I want to use this money to help her get settled. She's living in a car, for God's sake. Let me be a mother to her. It was a good performance. For a second, the room felt softer. Naomi stepped forward. She didn't look soft. She looked like a blade. A compromise, Naomi asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Mr. Hartman, you do not split the loot with the burglar after you catch them in the house. Objection, Hartman shouted. I am not done, Naomi snapped. You want to talk about motherly love? Let us talk about last Tuesday night. She pulled out a tablet and connected it to the courtroom display. The black and white footage of the Mill Creek loft appeared. It showed the figure in the trench coat, the screwdriver, the desperate, violent scratching at the lock, the panicked flight down the stairs. This is Denise Bryant, Naomi stated, attempting to break into the property where these evidence tapes were stored, 2 hours after the freezing order was issued. Denise gasped. She put a hand over her mouth. Naomi didn't stop. She projected the email from the anonymous investor. And this, an attempt to sell the entire $4 million asset for $300,000 in cash to a fence. An attempt made by a temporary email address linked to an IP address at Ms. Brooke Bryant's condo. Brooke, who had been silent until now, slumped in her chair, looking terrified. And finally, Naomi said, playing the audio file from the bean mill, I told the lawyers you were gone because you were gone. I threw all that stuff out years ago. It was literally trash. The courtroom was dead silent. The 50-50 offer hung in the air like a bad smell. This is not a family dispute, Your Honor, Naomi concluded. This is a decade-long heist, And they are only asking for half because they realize they got caught trying to take it all. Judge Price stared at Denise. Her expression was unreadable, which was terrifying. "Ms. Bryant," the judge said to my mother. "Stand up." Denise stood, her legs shaking. "Did you receive the certified mail from Branford and Lake in 2017 containing the original will?" the judge asked. "You are under oath." Denise opened her mouth. She looked at Hartman, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at Brooke, who was crying silently. Denise stammered. "I might have. There was so much mail. I didn't open everything. I thought it was bills. I swear. I thought it was just debt." "The receipt shows you signed for it," the judge said coldly, "and the email response from your account specifically stated your daughter was unreachable. You lied to the officers of the court, you lied to the executors, and you lied to your father." Judge Price leaned back. "However, before I issue my ruling, there is one final thing." She turned her gaze to me. "Ms. Faith Bryant," she said, "your lawyer has argued that this trust first test is a scientific method, a legacy passed down from your grandfather. I have seen the videos, but videos can be edited, conditions can be manipulated." My heart started to pound. "You say this philosophy is about earning trust," the judge continued. "Show me, right now." She nodded to the bailiff. "Bring them in." The side door opened. Ralph walked in. He had Buddy on a leash, but he also had another dog. It was a medium-sized cattle dog mix. It was shivering so hard its tags were jingling. Its tail was tucked completely between its legs. It was drooling, a sign of extreme nausea and fear. Ralph had told me about this dog. He was a new intake at the ranch, pulled from a hoarding situation 2 days ago. He had never known a kind hand. "The court has granted special permission for this demonstration," Judge Price said. "Ms. Bryant, you have 20 minutes. If this dog is truly part of your inheritance, prove it." Hartman laughed nervously. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. That animal looks dangerous." "Sit down, Mr. Hartman," the judge snapped. I stood up. I walked to the open space in front of the bench. Ralph handed me the leash of the scared dog and stepped back with Buddy. I took a deep breath. I looked at the terrified animal. He was pressing himself flat against the floor, trying to become invisible. I didn't look at the judge. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the dog. "It is okay," I whispered. I unclasped the heavy leather collar from Buddy's neck, Grandpa's collar. I held it in my hand. It was a talisman. I knelt down on the hardwood floor. I turned my body sideways. I made myself small. I started the hum, a low, steady vibration in my chest. The room was silent. You could hear the clock ticking. The dog watched me with wide, panicked eyes. I tossed a treat. It landed 2 feet from his nose. He didn't move. I didn't rush. I waited. Trust first. 5 minutes passed. My knees were hurting. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then, the dog stretched his neck. He sniffed the treat. He ate it. I whistled. Tweet, 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 too. The dog's ears twitched. It was a sound of curiosity, not command. I saw the shift. It was the moment the fear broke. His shoulders dropped. The trembling slowed. "Come on," I whispered. "I am not going to hurt you." The dog took a step, then another. He sniffed my boot. He sniffed my hand. I didn't reach for him. I let him choose. He stepped closer. He pressed his wet nose against my palm, and then, with a heavy sigh that echoed in the quiet courtroom, he circled once and laid his head down on my thigh. I rested my hand on his neck. "Good boy," I said. Buddy, watching from the side, let out a soft woof of approval. The dog looked up. He looked at the judge, who was leaning over the bench, fascinated. The dog stood up, walked over to the bench, and tentatively licked Judge Price's hand. The judge smiled. It was the first time I had seen her smile. "Let the record show," Judge Price said, her voice gentle, "that the witness has successfully demonstrated the Bryant method." She banged her gavel. The sound made everyone jump except me and the dogs. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Faith Bryant. Judge Price ruled. The last will and testament of Walter A. Bryant is hereby validated. The conditional trust is activated immediately. She turned her glare on Denise and Brooke. The counterclaim by Denise Bryant is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, due to the overwhelming evidence of fraud, spoliation of evidence, and breach of fiduciary duty, I am removing Denise Bryant as executor effective immediately. You are stripped of any and all fees collected. Your Honor, Hartman protested. I am not finished, the judge said. I am ordering a forensic audit of all estate accounts from 2014 to the present. Any funds misappropriated by Denise or Brooke Bryant will be repaid in full. If you cannot pay, your personal assets will be seized, and I am referring the evidence of the break-in and the email solicitation to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Denise collapsed into her chair, sobbing for real this time. Brooke looked at her mother with pure hatred. The Skyhound acquisition deal is approved at the new valuation of $4.5 million, plus 3% perpetual royalties, the judge continued. And per the plaintiff's request, 5% of all future proceeds will be diverted to establish the Walters Trust First Fund, dedicated to providing housing assistance for homeless women with pets and funding the Second Chance Ranch. Judge Price looked at me. Ms. Bryant, your grandfather would be proud. Case closed. The sun was setting when I pulled up to the Mill Creek Kennel. The snow had stopped, leaving the world clean and white. I walked up to the loft. I didn't need to sleep there tonight. I could afford a hotel. I could afford a house. I could afford anything. But this was home. I took the old leather collar, the one that had started everything, and walked to the wall above the desk. There was a wooden peg there, right next to the picture of Grandpa Walter. I hung the collar on the peg. We did it, Grandpa, I whispered. The pack is safe. I walked back down the stairs. Ralph was waiting by his truck. He smiled at me. So, he said, what now, boss? Now, I said, looking at the kennel runs that were waiting to be filled with dogs that needed a home. Now we get to work. We have a lot of strays to find. I whistled. Tweet, 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 too. Buddy bounded out of the barn, his tail waging, his eyes bright. He ran to me, pressing his side against my leg. I locked the gate behind me. It was my gate, my lock, my key. I wasn't the girl sleeping in the station wagon anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the alpha. And as I watched the sun dip below the mountains, painting the sky in gold and violet, I knew that for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below, so we can see how far our pack extends. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next one.